Hi, this is Stories of the Hope, a podcast by Mission of Hope. I'm your host, Benson Gregory. Robin Holland is our guest this week. She's the executive director of Compassion Ministries. Robin, thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for asking me.
You guys are located in Knoxville, Tennessee. Is that correct?
We are. We've been out in the West area for the last 16 years.
Oh, wow, 16 years. Is that how long the ministry has been around?
It's 16 years. We're going into our 17th year, the same location.
That's awesome. What exactly, paint me a big picture of exactly what it is that Compassion Ministries does.
Well, Compassion Ministries is a nonprofit and non denominational ministry that was started 16 plus years ago. And it's kind of a unique story. There was a gentleman in our church, and he's an elderly man, and he has always had compassion and just a willingness to help, but he had physically become where he couldn't do. He's a man that had planted seeds for churches. Bought whales over in foreign countries. He just had a heart to that. So he approached me one day and said, I have a job for you. Now, I know this gentleman for 40 years. And I really thought, well, maybe you just need a little help with your landscaping or something, but I'll come help you. And so he said, I want to start a food pantry. I said, no, 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 that's not me. And he said, yeah, it is. And I said, Jim, I don't like to ask people for money. And, you got to have a little money to do this. And he said, that's no problem. And I said, maybe you just don't know exactly how much money this is going to take. And so we tested the waters for about 6 to 9 months, and he funded it and kind of stayed in the church. And in where we were located, we weren't really seeing what I call hunger. You know, we were helping people because hunger
Mhm.
has a lot of different faces. So, um, a Second Harvest approached us and said, have you guys ever thought about being a partner? Well, that kind of intimidated me because I wasn't sure I knew what I was doing. And so we filled out the application and started working with them. And they said, hey, you guys do a mobile pantry, and this is how you do it. And so we did one in Farragut, and uh, now some people will tell you it was successful. I didn't think it was successful. We had all this food and more hominy than you could ever dream of, and we had 50 people show up. And I was like, "Oh, what are we gonna do?" So that was a learning curve. One, you gotta advertise it. One, you gotta let people know where you are. You gotta let them know what you're doing. And so then I just made a comment to a lady at Second Harvest. I said, "It's kinda too bad you can't get this food in the mountains where there's true hunger and true poverty." And she said, "Well, if you can get volunteers up there, I'll get the food." And I thought, "Well, we'll see. We'll see if we can do that." So we, uh, loaded up and took what we had and went up to, it was up in Campbell County. I just kinda lost the name of the school right there, but, it'll come back to me. We set up and we fed 150 families. And I can honestly tell you that's the first time, and I've lived in East Tennessee for 50 years. That's the first time I had been deep in the mountains and I had seen poverty. And these people were walking to get their groceries. And I was just like, well, you can't walk back home. I mean, you'll hurt yourself. And so some of the guys were giving them, rides back and everything. And then they were coming back and telling us, those people don't have a front porch. Those people, their house is falling down. And so
What struck you? What made you think it was poverty that you were seeing for the first time? What about their
what about that?
situation?
Yeah, it was the desperation in their face, the you could offer them something, um, and the, appreciation, the gratefulness, and in the mountains, they won't take more than they can use, they're not greedy people. And then just the appreciation, and you would see the kids, you know, and the that kinda changed me right there to take a step back and look, and so the next time we went back to Second Harvest, and I said, "Man, there's something going on up there." So they said, "Well, we'll send an 18-wheeler up there with you." I thought, "Well, sure. Have you been up there lately?" And, so we went up to what was called Clarefield, um, Elementary School, and that's in, Campbell County. Went up the mountain at Jellicoe and back down to the bottom part. Well, I'd never seen coal. I'd never seen anything like that. So we get down there and pull in. These people had started lining up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I mean,
Wow.
and we were getting there at 9 o'clock, and we still had to set up, and they would patiently waiting. And you just thought, okay, you've really kind of got to be desperate to come out this long and patiently wait, you know. So that was kind of the beginning of the mobile pantries. Mm, we just grew on that. I'd get in my car and drive in those mountains, and I would find little schools, little pockets of school. And when we first started, we would go to a school because we called that common ground, and people will come to a school because not everybody's going to go to a church so we would set it up in the school, and we would tell the principal of the school, we would say, you're the pastor of this church. You're the hero. You don't have to mention Compassion Ministries' name at all. You have brought this to your community to help. And so they would start helping us advertise it, and then it just started growing and growing and growing. And we would set up in their gyms in a gymnasium, and we had shopping carts, and we would team up with them, and we had 20 minutes to walk around and just show the love of Christ, and just
Now, what were you doing when the gentleman at church came to you and was like, "Hey, we need to start this food pantry"? What were you doing for vocation?
I I was just raising my kids. I just had my first
Just
grandbaby.
raising your kids.
I just had
Oh, okay. So your grandma. So you were a babysitter and advisor and all of that kind of stuff. So you had a little bit of free time.
I had yeah, oh yeah, I had free time. I had as much free time as I wanted, and I did a lot of work in my yard and just, petted
Hmm.
and was at the school constantly when my kids were growing up, and just, made sure I knew exactly what they were doing. And then my grandbabies came along, and I was involved with them. And then when Jim decided he was gonna lay this on me, I'm not gonna say I shifted gears. I brought my first granddaughter into the fold, and
There
we
you
did
go.
a mobile pantry at her school, 4 years old, and, she still helps me to this day, but it made an
Raise them up in the way they should go.
that's right, that's right. Um, so through the years, you found things that work and didn't work, and you just but what I saw was people how grateful they were, and we treated them, and we treat them today with so much respect, and we just love on them, and, it'll be okay, everything we've all got issues and stuff, and we just kind of, you know, work through it. We would stop and pray with people, and, people would come back and tell us, but what we did is we established a routine. Like every January, we would go to the same place, and so we would just
Hmm.
kind of go, and it used to take us about 15 months to make a circle, uh,
Hmm.
and then, when COVID hit, we had to kind of change things around a little bit, but we didn't stop. We just had to change things around a little bit. But during during that time up to COVID, um, we had established ourselves all through these mountains, just with just different schools and different organizations, and we ran into Emmett um, up in Hawkins County, and
You never know where you're gonna find him at.
no, that
Now
was
now how long was it before you were had you would hit your stride before you found Emmett,
yes,
or God
yeah,
put you
Emmett,
together? So
yeah.
how long did it take you to go from, "Oh, wow, I don't know if I wanna do this," to really hitting your stride? How many years was that?
Well, let's see. It took us about 4 years to work out the kinks and stuff. Because the first year we just kind of piddled in Knoxville. We had a local pantry, and it was doing great. And we were had our hands on stuff, and different situations would come up, and then I kind of talked to Second Harvest, and they were like, "Well, y'all can go here." So we would do one mobile pantry a year, and to us, that
Okay,
was
and that was in the first 4 years, you were doing about 1 a year?
about one a year. Yeah, and and so then they said, "Yeah, hey, if you'll go, we'll help you." And I was like, "Well, we have to have a truck, and we have to have all this stuff," and so we um, saw the need. So the first time we set up, uh, we had 5. After we was just doing 1, we went to 5, and we spaced them out so that we didn't wear everybody out. And then we saw there's more of a need. And so one of the guys, that a businessman that helped me, he said, "Man, Robin, wouldn't it be great if we could take uh, meat up in the mountain, frozen meat?" And I said, "Yeah, it would be." I said, "But, you know, meat's expensive." So, um, I said, "We don't have a freezer truck. You gotta have a freezer truck, you gotta have all this stuff for food safety." So I was talking to one of the guys over at Second Harvest. He's no longer there, but he was one of these guys, and he kinda intimidated everybody. And I said, "Hey, Zach," I said, "if I was to show up with a freezer truck, what would you do?" He said, "If you can find yourself a freezer truck, I'll fill it full, and you can take it to these mountains." And I said, "Every time? Every time?" He goes, "Yeah." Well, the businessman I was talking to, he got us a freezer truck. So we drove up over there, and I said, "Fill it up, cause we're going." He said, "I never dreamed you'd be able to pull this off." So,
That's
w
amazing.
yeah, so then when we started, showing up with meat. Meat is very, very valuable, and so we
Well, yeah.
yeah. So we would show up with meat, and then, all the other stuff that we could round up and everything, and, as time went on, we developed a relationship with a ministry over in North Carolina who works with Campbell Soups. So 96 pallets of Campbell Soups would come into our place a year. And then we had the liberty to get to distribute it. You distribute it or you sit on it because it's a lot of food. So
Well, yeah.
then we could offer it to different ministries, "Hey, we can help you out. We can give you some chicken noodle soup, and stuff." And so that that right there helped us start building relationships because people looked at us, "Hey, they're real. They can get their hands on this stuff." And we donated a lot to Mission Hope, and still do, and we donate a lot to Second Harvest. So then that's always kinda been nice to have that product, and when you're in the
Mhm.
mountains and you have that name brand product, the name brand,
Well, yeah. Yeah.
then that shows them respect, you know, that they're gonna get the stuff they see on TV. That's good, and that means a lot to people right there.
Tell me how you met Emmett. You said you bumped into Emmett Thompson He was the former executive director
Yes.
emeritus now of Mission of Hope. So
Yeah.
how'd you bump into him? How'd that go?
Let's see. We were up in Hawkins County, and he and at this particular time, Second Harvest cannot go into Hawkins County, but we can go in there because we have Campbell soups and all this stuff. So I just said to him, he just said, "Hey, Emmett, hey, would you just bring a little food in here?" And I said, "Yeah, we will." So we go up there with our little volunteers and stuff, and we take our Campbell soups, and we have 2 trucks, and then actually, I think we had a couple of pickups or trailer. And we set our food out, and they kinda and Emmett knows this, and he gets so aggravated. So they kinda scoot us over in the corner, kind of, Y'all get over in the corner because 'cause we're gonna give away all these
Uh-huh.
clothes and these shoes and this," and I said, "We'll go in the corner. That's no problem." Well, he kind of looked at, these people are really gravitating towards the food. They need food. And um, so then anyway, I went over and introduced myself to him. And I said, I hope we didn't, take up too much space. And he's like, "No, no, no, I didn't realize you was going to bring that much food." And I said, "Well, we can go put it back in the truck." "No, no, 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 this is wonderful." And I said, "Okay." I go, "Well, Emmett, people really need food. They really don't have to have all these clothes and stuff. They need them. Yes, they need them. They got to have some food." And so he said, "Yeah, I kind of see that." So then we went with him again in Scott County. Well, he gave us a little bit more room. Well, the people were going past the stuff and coming and getting in line with food because they was afraid that we was going to give all the food away. So then
Mhm.
yep. So we sat down and and he said, "Robin, we got to figure this out." And I said, "Well, hey, I tell you what, I need volunteers. I need manpower, and we can put these things on pretty big if we can get volunteers." So we had scheduled one um, March of 2020 when COVID hit. We had just left Cookville where the tornado hit. And Baxter, it had come through there and just
Mhm.
tore that place apart. We had just gotten back from helping over there, and then everything got shut down. Just shut down, and so I told him, I said, we don't really know what we can do, and so we postponed it, and then he noticed we kept doing it. We just kind of figured out, okay, drive up in your car, open your trunk. Here, we're gonna put this food in your trunk. Thank you. Be safe. And we had masks on and the whole thing. And
Mhm.
so then it was that fall of that year. He said, what would you think if you went to Scott County with us?" He said, "It's a poor county." I said, "Oh, we love Scott County. We've been up there so many times." So we go up there and we pull in and everything, and we have about 550 cars in line. And he
My
is so
goodness. Was that a surprise? That's a lot of cars.
we had bumped it up from like 250, 300. And so when we started pulling in, well, he was like, "Oh no, oh no." I said, "We got it. We got it. Go have a cup of coffee in it. We've got this." So we,
Mhm.
laid it out, and he brought in the volunteers. He brought in the volunteers, and I said, I'm gonna give you all a 5 minute a lesson on what we're doing." And they stepped in and caught the vision. And so when we're together, he brings in 125 volunteers. And so that makes it easier on all of us, because we get it set up, and we bring in well over $100,000 worth of food, which is about 48 pallets, 50 pallets of food. And then when you think about it, you got to put 2 to 4 people with each pallet, and then you have people directing traffic, people doing intake, people out there talking to them, praying with them, and everything. So it takes a massive team to make it run good. Now, you can do it on a smaller scale, but you're pretty much wore out at the end of the day. But
Yeah, it
I
sounds like a very involved, very, like, volunteer intensive effort, right? How many volunteers do you use for that?
Well, our core team, the people that, we show up and get these trucks unloaded and everything, there's about 20 of us. It's 20 of us, 25 of us, and then he brings in 125. So if we have 150 people there and everybody's got a job, it is just like clockwork. You can just let it roll. And it used to take us all day to do it, and then we kept tweaking it and tweaking it. So now we got it down to about 3 hours of work. Now we got to set it up and clean it up, but in 3 hours we can get people through there and get them taken care of. So it's it's not a small thing, but it's very doable. Yeah, and
Oh, 500 people sounds amazing to me. You've put a lot of effort into the logistics to make sure that you can get that done.
yeah,
You need
yeah.
to take good credit for that because that's a big undertaking.
Well, it's 500 families, which is usually calculates out to 2,000, 2,500 people, So when you start calculating out how many people you've actually touched, so then you're like, this is, and when you're in there and you see people that, you've helped them, and we give them enough food. We give them enough food to last them. This is not one meal. This is gonna get you through for a while because one thing you see in the mountains, and I just shared this at our last mobile pantry. I said, "We had a cold winter. It was very cold. Our utility bills, our gas bill high. All of us felt it. We all were affected by it." I said, "But some of these people are having to choose between paying that heating bill, gas in that car, or medicine, or food." And I said, "So don't look at anybody because we're just gonna help you get over the hump." And, that if you kinda have that mindset, it's easier to just, to serve, just to serve people. So,
Is there a particular time you can point to where it was just you didn't feel like you could handle it, where it was just more than you could do and Jesus just really showed up and just kinda brought everything together for you at any point during the last 17 years?
there was a time over in, North Carolina, a tornado had hit, and they asked us to come over, and, we did. We got our trucks and everything, and we went over there, and luckily, Campbell's Soups showed up with, 2 18-wheelers, and then we had one 18-wheeler after another show up with bleach, with mops, with shovel, and you are just like, "Oh, I've got to organize this to make this happen." And, and it's, like, chaotic, and that used to make Emmett so nervous because it was so chaotic, and you just wanna
That
say,
would make
"Just"
me nervous.
yeah, "If you just move over here," and then it's just like it all of a sudden will jail, and it happens. And, there's been times when you maybe you didn't know where all the money was gonna come from, and all of a sudden there was money to pay for the trucks and stuff, or somebody decided they were gonna sponsor you.
Mhm.
There's times when we were in North Carolina, this happened to me 2 times. A man walked there, he walked. The cars were 2.5 miles long. Of course, I can make any police officer mad as anything because 'cause I've created a traffic jam. And this man walked, and he climbed over the little guardrail and came down and stood in line. The cars were moving, and he was right there. And I went up to him and I said, "Sir, you can't carry all this stuff. Do you not have a car?" And he said, "I don't need a whole lot of stuff." And he said, can I just take what I need? And I said, well, of course you can. Of course you can. And something in me, when I saw him get what little bit he had, he walked up the hill and climbed the guardrail and just went off in the distance. And I thought, if you've ever wondered if you saw Jesus, you might have just seen an angel. You might have just seen an angel
Uh-huh.
there because he was so humble and so grateful that you just think, hmm, that's maybe we just sowed a seed into somebody's life. And
Yeah.
we were up in Ray County at this place called Frostbite, and a lot of places up there. It's up in Bledsoe County. They don't have running water. A lot of the places don't. They don't have indoor toilets or anything. We go up there to this little church, and they leave a water hose on their spigot so people can fill up jugs. Well, this was foreign to me too. I was like, well, wow, that's pretty cool. We get out there and we have about three or 400 people, and you're going straight up a mountain. And we are going 5 miles an hour in a huge truck loaded down. And I'm like, let me just get out and walk. I can walk faster when we get this truck up there. So we get up there and we unload and do everything. And so I'm like, hey, we're Compassion Ministries. We're so glad to be here. We've just um, here just to bless y'all. I said, boy, the enemy has fought us tooth and nail. And I said, somebody up here has been praying because we've had a hard time getting here. And this little lady yelled out, she said, it was me. It was me. I've been praying for food. And I could have just cried. I said, well, we're going to
Right.
give you some food. And I thought, you just don't know. You just don't know
Yeah.
what you're doing or who you're touching. So you just pray that you just stay right there in the will of God, and he'll help you. He'll help you. So,
That is really awesome. And it all goes back to you coming outside of your comfort zone and taking a position doing something that you didn't necessarily want to do because
no.
you didn't like the idea of asking for money and asking for help. And
Mm-mm.
look at everything that has
Mhm.
been that you've been blessed with.
Yeah, yeah, and we've run into some snags. I mean, you can kind of see when the enemy will start coming towards you, and, we needed a warehouse. Desperately, we needed a warehouse, and so a businessman, he had a space, and he said, "Y'all can just use my warehouse, right here." And we were grateful and appreciative and everything, and, he, passed away. And so his widow sold the building. And about the time she was putting it on the market is when Mission of Hope stepped in and said, and they didn't know this. They didn't know the story because we didn't tell the story. And
Hmm.
David said, "No, Robin, I can warehouse for you." And I said, "Okay." And he said, "I got volunteers, I got loading docks, I've got space." And I said, "Well, what would that look like?" So we just started working together, and I can back that truck up, and those guys will unload that truck for me and get me organized, and then back to wherever I'm going. And when we all go to the mountains together, they'll load their trucks. They'll help me load my trucks, and then we go up there as a team, and we'll be in
Hmm.
Granger County April 11th. And they're Granger County. We sit right on the Hawkins County line, and they're all very excited about us coming up there. Very excited. The Clayton Homes, the Norris plant, they're the ones that's hosting us. And so first first time we approached them and said, "Hey, what do you think about us doing this?" They kind of like, "Sure, come on." Well, once we got there, they were like, "Oh dear, yeah, we better move some stuff out of the way." And then now all we have to do is call, and they're like, "Yeah, come on, come on." So we started last month down in Loudoun County. It's the first time we'd ever been in Loudoun County, and so now we're April will be up in Granger County, and then for the next 11 or I guess 10 months now, we'll be on the road in the mountains somewhere. So, and that's
Is
what
there anything that you need? Do
oh,
you need volunteers? Do you need people to give financially? Do you need people to show up? What do you need?
what we need is volunteers. And of course, if anybody wants to support us for money, they can can bless us that way. And then we, David and them are Mission Hope is in one part of town, and Compassion Ministries is like 15, 16 miles from there. And so we are losing our what we call our on-site location. We're having to just kind of move out the door a little bit, but God's working on this. He is working on this, and so we've our dream is to put up some type of office warehouse so
Mhm.
that if I retire, which I will, the next person might not have the heart to say, "Oh, I can work in this." They want to walk in somewhere air conditioned, sit down. So that's kind of the guys on the board. That's kind of their vision. We need to get a home. We need to get a home, and of course, David has offered us everything. They take care of us. So in one way, we don't really worry about it, but it's out there. But he, he's got it. It's somewhere. So he's got
Well,
it.
God
So
has provided so much for you at every turn. I'm still stuck on that freezer truck just showing up and everything that you've gotten. So I wouldn't doubt that this will be taken care of as well. So somebody out there is listening, maybe, and will respond.
yeah. Well, there's a gentleman, precious man. I was over in Fentress County, and we didn't have a truck. We did trailers and pickup trucks, and then they took the 18-wheelers up there. And he called me as I'm on my way home from Fentress County. He said, "Hey, Robin." And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "I'm gonna buy you a box truck." And I said, "Do we have a bad connection?" And he said, "And I'm gonna buy." He goes, "I'm gonna buy you one that has a lift gate." And I said, "Really?" He goes, "Yep, because you cannot continue to lift this stuff." Well, we went to Ted Russell and we said, "We need a box truck with a lift gate." They set us up and they gave us a nice little discount and everything. And this man wrote a check for it, and which just kind of blew me away. I mean, I was just kind of
Yeah,
standing there in awe that he brand new, brand new. And I said, "Well, this is just wonderful." I still drive that truck to this day. It doesn't have a whole lot of miles on it, but I drive it, and I think of him every time because he really had a heart for
that's awesome.
people in the mountains. So, and the three guys that I worked with, they were all very successful in what they did. They all had a heart for benevolence and poverty. It's just they physically could not do anything. Physically,
Yeah.
they just and I said, "Well, we can do it." So that's what we've been doing, and we're gonna keep doing it, and, just kinda sit back and watch him. We say every once in a while, "Well, he's just showing out now. Just go ahead and show out." We can keep up, just show out. So that's how our relationship, uh, came with Mission of Hope, and, and then David and the team up there had, weaknesses in the computers and stuff like that, and they're like, "Hey, we got people who like to do that." And I said, "Well, here, y'all do that for me. Here, do this for me." And they
Awesome.
said, "We love it. We're busy." And I said, "Glad y'all love it." I said, "'Cause I'll go drive the truck." That's what I tell 'em all the time, "I'll just go drive the truck."
There you go. The executive director slash truck driver. That's right. Well, the website for anybody who's interested and wants to check out more, maybe volunteer, maybe make a donation is
Right.
compassionministries.org, correct?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And it's, and I and I'm Robin Rowland. And that's my phone number that you will call on there, and you'll get me, and I'll direct you to whoever can help you, or we'll figure out the situation and everything. So, but that's us. We're not going anywhere.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, Robin, thank you so much for taking time out of, I know how busy you are. We worked to schedule a time and had to move it around a little bit because I know
Well,
you're busy, and
appreciate
I
your work.
appreciate you doing it.
Well, I've enjoyed
Uh,
it very much. If I can help anyway, um, share the hope, I'll help y'all do it.
I appreciate that so
Mhm.
much. That is all the time we have for today. Our guest has been Robin Rowland. She's the executive director of Compassion Ministries, based out of Knoxville. My name is Benson Gregory. I am your host and producer. Our co producer is Becky Mills. And this is Stories of the Hope, a podcast by Mission of Hope. See you next time.